Welcome to Faith Vocals. My name is Faith. I'm back after a brief unannounced break last week. I did announce the week before, that was our video on Shechem and the sons of Jacob. I did announce that things were a little bit uncertain in my my family's plans and my family's future. There was something we were waiting for. We didn't know when it would happen. It would be a considerable upset. Well, that thing happened. I'm not going to go into detail. It went more smoothly than I expected, so that was good. But I decided to go ahead and take last week off to make room for that. So that was semi-expected. I didn't know when to let you know I'd be taking a break, but I knew I'd be taking one depending on how things went. And now I'm back, and we can continue on with the series that I've been doing. We've been going through the book of Genesis, as you well know, as if you've been following along with the channel. Going story by story through the book of Genesis. We've made it to the account of Jacob, and the last story that we came to was kind of difficult. I'm familiar with it, had known it was there, but it just was stunning to me, the level of atrocity that happened when going through this story, where first Shechem raped the daughter of Jacob. Her name was Dinah. Then he actually fell in love with her and wanted to marry her, which would have made amends for the sin that he had committed against her, according to the law of the nation of Israel, which wouldn't be instituted for at least 400 years into the future. But God doesn't change, and God is the one who instituted the law of Israel, so that law reflects God's character, which was the same even back to the time of Jacob. And so it seems to me that Shechem would have made things right had he been able to marry Dinah and have a regular family with her. But unfortunately, two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, decided to deceive the nation into getting into a weak spot, using the covenant that God had made with Abraham against this city of Shechem, all the people that were in this city. And I assume it was kind of a city-state. It says that Shechem's father was the king of the city. So these two sons of Jacob were able to just slaughter the whole city, all the men in the city. They took the women and children for themselves. The Bible doesn't delineate what happened to the women and children, so I suppose those who are more familiar with the culture would have known what to expect regarding the women and the children. Just a terrible thing that Jacob's sons did. And so Jacob was concerned. What if the other nations hear about this? They're going to think of us as a threat. They're going to try to exterminate us. But thankfully, God had made a promise to Jacob and to Jacob's father Isaac and to Jacob's grandfather Abraham. And God was going to give Abraham offspring. Abraham had been waiting for a child up until he was 100 years old, and that child was Isaac. But God would give Abraham offspring through Isaac, and then promised Isaac's wife Rebekah that it would be Jacob through who the promise would go. Jacob would be the more powerful son even over his older brother Esau. And so God had promised to be with Jacob and protect Jacob, and God finally told Jacob, I want you to go to Bethel, and I want you to make an altar to me there. So let me go ahead and jump in at the beginning of the chapter where we are. We're going to kind of overlap some of what we covered last week. Actually, I'm a little lower in the chapter. God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So God says, I don't want you in Shechem. I want you to go and dwell in Bethel. So Jacob said to his household and all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you, and purify yourselves, and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, so that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress, and has been with me wherever I have gone. And as I mentioned last time, Bethel is a significant city because when David was leaving his family, was leaving his father Isaac, his mother Rebekah, and his brother Esau, who wanted to kill him because Jacob had deceived Isaac into giving Jacob the blessing that Isaac was going to give Esau. Isaac blessed Jacob, intending it to be Esau. He was blind. He couldn't see to know which son it was that he was blessing. He thought he was blessing Esau with the preeminent position between the two brothers. And that blessing wound up going to Jacob instead. And when Esau discovered that Jacob had taken his blessing, he asked Isaac, "Don't you have another one for me?" And Isaac basically said, "I've given him everything. What do I have left?" So let's actually jump back and see that I've just realized how handy this tool is. So let's see. We'll couple chapters back. We'll go back and see what the blessing that Esau actually received was. It's somewhere down here. Okay, well, the blessing for Jacob, I'll recap that. Jacob was wearing Esau's clothing, so Isaac was deceived by the scent of the clothing into thinking that it was Esau instead of Jacob. So he says, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and the blessing and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." So that was the blessing that went to Jacob instead of to Esau. And then when Esau came and realized that his blessing was gone, he asked for a blessing. Isaac couldn't give him anything equivalent to what he had already given Jacob, so this was the answer that Isaac said to him. "Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high." And we've got to watch these footnotes because sometimes they do want to be careful with how they're translating the Bible from the original languages. Sometimes the translation process is difficult. So these footnotes let us know it might be, "Behold, of the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be." So it's either away from or of. Probably away from, given what Isaac had blessed Jacob with. Isaac had blessed Jacob with, there we go. With the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine, right? And he couldn't give Esau the same blessing. So behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. I'm going to assume that's the same kind of translation issue there. "By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck." So that's what Esau got out of the deal, which doesn't sound too great. So Jacob had to flee Esau because Esau was ready to kill him for stealing his blessing and his birthright. Jacob had taken advantage of a weak moment that Esau had to get Esau to trade his birthright to Jacob. Esau, the Bible tells us that Esau despised his birthright because he didn't seek to hold on to it. But even so, neither one of them was perfectly right in that situation. Jacob should not have taken advantage of Esau, and Esau should not have given up that birthright so readily. So we have Jacob, where I came in was Jacob was fleeing Esau, leaving his parents, heading up north to Haran to meet his mother's family and see if he could find a safe place there. And on the way, he stopped by a city named Luz, which he later called Bethel. God showed him a vision there at Bethel, and I've already gone over that a couple times, so I won't dwell on it. But Jacob wound up making a memorial, I guess, would be the way to say it. It wasn't like an altar, but it was he used the stone that he had for a pillow when he received that vision, or dream, actually. It was a dream. He poured oil over the pillow, so kind of a sacrifice to commemorate the event. And he said that if God would protect him, bring him back, give him the clothing and the supplies he needed, then he would serve the Lord. In the future, would give God a tenth of his possessions. Let me just make sure I've got those details correct here. I am one chapter ahead there. And now I'm going to go to the bottom of this screen. If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my Father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me I will give a full tenth to you. So now God has brought him back to the land of his family, as we're going to find. And God has supplied him not only with food and clothing, but with great wealth. And God has been with him all the way through his travels, and even to the point that he's afraid currently, because of his son's shenanigans, that the nations are going to consider him a threat. They're going to destroy him. But as he's going to Bethel, as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people who were with him. And there he built an altar and called the place El Bethel. So Bethel was the name he gave it before. It means house of God. And now with El in front of it, you might well imagine it means God of Bethel, God of the house of God. Reaffirming that God is indeed in this place, and this is God's place, because there God had revealed himself to him when he fled from his brother. So this is a significant moment. God is calling Jacob back to this place where Jacob made the promise. I think God is reminding Jacob, you did make me a promise that you would serve me if I did these things, and I have done all these things. And now God is asking him to build an altar there, which implies that Jacob is going to be serving God. And Jacob is totally on board with this, because he's telling his household to put away their foreign gods and to purify themselves in order to devote themselves to the one true God. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods that they had and the rings that were in their ears. Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem, and they journeyed away. So he left all of those things behind. So now we're going to start where we stopped the last time, and the first thing that we see here, and Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried under an oak below Bethel. So he called its name Alon Bakuth. Alon Bakuth means oak of weeping. So this would have been a significant member of the family. I don't know that Deborah would have gone with him to Laban's. The Bible doesn't say that Rebekah sent her nurse with Jacob all the way to Laban's. It doesn't say she didn't, but so I can't speculate much, except that Jacob is now back in the land of his family. He's already met his brother Esau. They had a kind of tense exchange. Esau wanted to welcome him back home, but I think Jacob wasn't sure how much he could trust Esau, so he accepted Esau's offer, but did not wind up coming back with Esau. He chose to go to Shechem instead, as we've seen in previous account. We're going to get a little bit more detail on why Jacob did not accept Esau's offer also, but I think distrust would have been a large part of it. So it could have been that Jacob encountered other family. Clearly he has met up or had Deborah around, and she is died when Jacob married Leah and Rachel. We're told that Laban sent handmaids with them. So let me go ahead and see if I can find that. I don't think I'll find it in cross references, so I'll do another jump here. That would have been in chapter 29, I guess. Okay, so Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. So when it was finally time for his wedding to Rachel, Laban pulled a switch on him without telling him. Laban gave him Leah to marry, and I guess behind the wedding veil and maybe in the dark of the wedding night, Jacob didn't realize who he had married. But it tells us that Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. And Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife later on. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So I think there was what is the word I'm looking for? A tradition. I had to pull from Fiddler on the Roof. If you've ever seen that movie, I quickly flashed that movie across my mind so I could get the word I needed. But it seems like there would have been a tradition of giving a handmaid, a servant, maybe to assist the wife who is going to be part of this new family. Maybe to give her a connection to her old family if the wife can't get away, to send word to her old family. I don't know if the servant would have been able to, but definitely to be of assistance. And we do find that these servants also were concubines to Jacob later on when Leah and Rachel were having trouble with childbirth. So that was another tradition that's kind of hard for me to wrap up my mind around in our culture, that a servant would be a concubine and her children would be understood to be the children of the actual wife who was not able to bear children herself. We see a couple of accounts of that in the Bible. So there is one other thing I want to check if I can remember where that passage was. It would have been trying to find a wife for Isaac when Isaac was ready to have a wife and Rebekah was found for him. We're in that neighborhood. I thought that maybe Rebekah had gone with her nurse, but I want to double check that. Okay, so I'm in. So, yes, Abraham had sent a servant to Haran to find a wife for Isaac from Abraham's own people. The servant found the family, and God helped him to determine who was supposed to be Isaac's wife. So he asks them if she can go with him to marry Isaac. And it seems like she agreed to that. We'll get to the agreement in a moment. So her brother Laban, he shows up again, and Bethuel, her father, answered and said, "The thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the earth before the Lord. Tell you what, I'll jump a little bit. When they arose in the morning, he said, "Send me away to my master." Her brother and her mother said, "Let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go." But he said to them, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master." Abraham would have been aging at that time. That's why he's concerned about getting a good wife for his son. The servant doesn't know, likely, whether he's going to see Abraham again by the time he gets back, so he wants to get back as soon as possible. They said, "Let us call the young woman and ask her." And they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" She said, "I will go." So she is a willing party to this arrangement. So they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. So this is where Deborah enters the family of Abraham. Deborah went with Rebekah, and Rebekah married Isaac. As far as I know, Rebekah was the only wife that Isaac had. Esau and Jacob were the only children that Isaac and Rebekah had, and they were both by Rebekah. So this is not a case where the nurse was anything more than a nurse. But now we're finding that we've come to the end of Deborah's life here in Genesis chapter 35, and she would have been probably someone that Jacob had known his whole life, except for the period that he was running away from Esau. Would have been a formative character in Jacob's life. So definitely a cause for grief now that she has departed. We never find out what happened to Rebekah. I did check further in the book of Genesis. I double checked. I cannot find any other reference to Rebekah. I was wrong, though, when I said that Jacob would not see Isaac again and would not see Esau again after they parted, after Isaac came back, or after Jacob came back to the land. So I was wrong about that. I had made mention of that a few times. We're going to see where Jacob meets both of them again in this chapter. So just wanted to correct myself on that. But here, Deborah is deceased, and then God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. Or translation could be God had appeared to Jacob again, so we don't know exactly where in the timeline this happened, but God has a meeting with Jacob. It speaks to Jacob, and God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." So he called his name Israel, which is interesting because we saw when Jacob first received the name Israel, it wasn't at this moment. It was when Jacob was getting ready to face Esau for the first time after he'd fled from Esau. Now he's coming back to the land because God told him to. And now he hears Esau wants to meet him, and Esau has brought 400 men, and Jacob's concerned. Is Esau coming to do him in finally? So he spends a tense night. I think it said that he could not sleep the night that he was expecting, the night before the day he was expecting to meet Esau, and he encountered a man a stranger, and they wrestled. I don't know what kind of preamble there was to this incident, or whether they just started wrestling with one another. It seems like an odd thing, and the man finds that Jacob will not let him go, and Jacob says, the Bible says the man touched or struck, depending on how the word goes. I don't know what the actual sense of that word is, but touched Jacob's thigh as they were wrestling, and it put out his thigh. It put it out of joint. So that was an injury that Jacob walked away with, but he still did not let the man go, even though his thigh was put out of joint. And so when the man told him to let go, Jacob said, "No, not until you bless me." And the man asks Jacob his name, and then tells Jacob that his name is going to be Israel. And that is apparently the blessing that Jacob walks away with. Jacob called that place Peniel, which means face of God, because he considered himself to have seen the face of God in that place. And I just want, now that I've been wrong about Isaac and Esau, I just want to make sure I double check myself on these things. Is it 34? Nope. Let's go a little further back. I think it would be this chapter. All right, here it is. "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Israel seems to have the sense of strives with God, or God strives. I think maybe there's I know the word ish in Israel is man, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of the sense of striving with God and man in that name. Jacob said, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." So that's why he calls that place face of God. So Jacob considers himself to have had an encounter with God at that location. And then now he's having another meeting with God, and God is confirming that, yes, the name that that man gave Jacob is actually the name that God wants Jacob to have. So I just think that's interesting, because we never find out who the man was that Jacob actually wrestled. So we get the assumption that that man is God based on Jacob's interpretation of the events. And now we have confirmation that, yes, Jacob is no longer to be considered Jacob, but is to be considered Israel. And in the future, we do see both Jacob and Israel used in reference to Jacob, as we will in this chapter. God said to him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you." So he is extending the promise that he gave to Abraham on to his grandson Jacob. Then God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him, and Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone. He poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it. So very much similar to what he did before at Bethel. He's doing that again, commemorating that event again. So Jacob called the name of the place where God had spoken with him Bethel. This Jacob setting up a pillar seems to be the way that he establishes a monument or creates a memory of these events that happen in his life. I think it would have been a cultural understanding. I think I've heard of the concept of living stones, these kind of pillars that people in the Middle East would set up to serve as a reminder for people who came to that location. Maybe Jacob's descendants, those who came by and knew of the event, would be reminded, oh, there's that pillar. This is the place where it happened. The pillars would have served as a kind of witness of the events that occurred there, would keep retelling the people who came by, this is the place where it happened. When they journeyed from Bethel, when they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel went into labor, and she had hard labor. And when her labor was at its hardest, the midwife said to her, "Do not fear, for you have another son." And we know from earlier that Rachel really had a hard time bearing children. She went for a long time barren, even though she was Jacob's favored wife. So you can imagine they had ample opportunity to have children, but it just didn't happen. Finally, God allowed her to bear her son Joseph, who would have been alive by this time. Now she is late in life, I suppose, having a child, another son. And as her soul was departing, for she was dying, she called his name Ben-Oni. So our footnote here tells us it could mean son of my sorrow or son of my strength. Given that she's dying, given that the labor is so hard, I'm assuming probably son of her sorrow. But his father called him Benjamin, which means son of the right hand. So we can see that Benjamin is set up to be Jacob's favored son because his wife has finally had another son. She's only had two sons. His other wife, Leah, who was foisted on him, he didn't really love her. She's had 6 sons herself. And each of their servants who were concubines to Jacob had 2 sons. I didn't need to spell that out because we're going to get the genealogy in a bit, but it's special to her that to Jacob that Rachel has these 2 sons. These 2 sons are elevated in his esteem above all of their older brothers, which is interesting to me. It seems to be a theme. Jacob was the younger son, elevated above Esau, and now Jacob is elevating his 2 youngest sons above their older brothers because they're the sons of his favored wife Rachel. And later on we're going to see the theme continue as we continue in the book of Genesis. So Rachel died, and she was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. That is the same Bethlehem where Jesus was born. And Jacob set up a pillar over her tomb. It is the pillar of Rachel's tomb, which is there to this day. So again, setting up a monument for her. Israel, that would be Jacob, as we know, journeyed on and pitched his tent toward the tower, beyond the tower of Eder. While Israel lived in that land, Reuben went in and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard of it. So we have this brief moment here. This is kind of unthinkable to me. Reuben was not related to Bilhah. Reuben was the son of Leah. I guess that's why we go on with the genealogy here. So let's go ahead and spell this out, get this out of the way. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. So those were the 6 sons of Leah. The sons of Rachel, Joseph, and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's servant, Dan, and Naphtali. So as we can tell here, Bilhah, and we kind of cross where she became a member of the family. She was the servant that Laban gave with Rachel to help Rachel. And when Rachel was not having children, when it was clear that she was barren, then she saw that Leah was having children and was afraid that would give Leah preeminence over Rachel in the family hierarchy, even though Jacob loved her more than Leah. And so she told Jacob to take Bilhah as his concubine, and then any of Bilhah's children would be considered to be Rachel's. So these were the children of that union, Dan and Naphtali. And then Leah was not bearing for a while, and so she gave Jacob Zilpah to have children by. The sons of Zilpah, Leah's servant, Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. So we're just going to track back here. So Reuben was not related in any way to Bilhah. She was a servant from outside of the family. She did have relations. She was a concubine of Jacob. So I think by the law that later on was over the nation of Israel, that union would not have been allowed. That was a dishonor to not only to Bilhah but also to Jacob, according to the thought process behind the laws that were laid down. So this was definitely I think we all understand in today's day and age this was unconscionable, but definitely it was unconscionable. I think it's interesting. It just tells us, and Israel heard of it. It doesn't tell us that he did anything. He just heard of it. So we don't know what he did or did not do. It does get addressed later on in the book. It does affect Reuben and even Reuben's offspring in the future. So we'll come to that when we come to it. But that is a tiny moment in the story of Genesis, but it does have impact later. And Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre. Yea, Isaac is still alive. At Mamre, or Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. And each of these different names for this location have significance. Abraham made friends with someone named Mamre, one of the Canaanites in the region. His name was Mamre. Abraham set up his tent by the oak of Mamre, so Mamre's property. Abraham was permitted to settle there for a time. Mamre was living around the region of Kiriath Arba. Kiriath means city. Arba was the name of the city. And Arba was of a group of people called the Rephaim, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll do a quick cross-reference there if I can. I don't think it's, there we go. No, I don't think it's going to give me the direct reference I'm looking for, but it was in the region of the Anakim. This area of Hebron later went to an Israelite named Caleb, who was faithful to God, and Caleb fought off the Anakim. There we go. Here we are. Now the name of Hebron formerly was Kiriath Arba, city of Arba. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. So he was the ancestor of the people that Caleb later drove from the region. And by God's command, when God was calling Israel back into this land that he had promised them. So there's a lot of history in the names for this location. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. And I wanted to comment on this because Abraham, we found earlier in the book, lived to be 175 years. And I think for people in our time, we look at that and we go, that's amazing. We're amazed if someone lives to be 100 years. Kind of hard to believe that people would live to be 75 years, would live to be 180 years. In the beginning of Genesis, we're told that people were living to be upwards of 900 years. Adam died when he was about 930 years. We know the oldest man in the Bible is Methuselah at 969 years. And then over time, the ages of people diminished. There was, let me look up some history here. I'm trying to recall. I was trying to recall if there was a account of Noah's age. Let me go back a little bit further. So Genesis chapter 5 is where we learn how old Adam lived, 930 years. Let's see, Noah's father was named Lamech. Lamech lived to be 777 years. So by this time, I believe we chalk up the decline in ages to the effects of sin. People were not supposed to die the way God originally created the world. Adam and Eve sinned. They disobeyed God, and they introduced death into the world according to the Bible. And death doesn't just affect us at the end of our lives. It is also continually affecting us. Our cells are trying to reproduce themselves, and there are mistakes. There's entropy in the process, and our bodies decline over time as these mutations accumulate, and those mutations get passed on in the gene pool. So I believe that this wear on the human gene pool meant that we were going from 962 years to, by the time of Noah, Lamech's father was 777 years. And then I don't, let me see if the place I'm going says anything about Noah's age. I need to be one more chapter over. Okay, it doesn't tell us about Noah's age. I'm sure it's somewhere, and I probably skipped it, but I won't dwell on that. We learn about Shem, the son of Noah, that Shem lived to be 100 plus 500, 600 years. So from 777 down to 600. And then we have an event, Eber, 403 years. When he had lived 34 years, he fathered Peleg. And Eber lived after he fathered Peleg. Oh, sorry, no. Eber lived 34 years, and then after Peleg, 430 years, so he would have been about 464. Peleg lived 30 years, and then after he became a father, he lived only 209 years, so he lived a total of 239 years. That's half of what his father lived. And then from that point on, people are living into the 200s. Peleg is the father of Ru. Ru's the father of Serug. Serug is the father of Nahor. Nahor is the father of Terah. And Terah named one of his sons Nahor. The other son he named Abraham. And the other son he named Haran. That was the name of the city where Abram's brother Nahor settled. And where we find Laban. And where Abram and his descendants keep sending their family back to find wives. So we find in in the previous chapter, I'm not going to jump back there, but Peleg lived during a time when the earth was divided. I'm not sure what all was involved, but it seems like it was a traumatic worldwide process. Perhaps it explains why we have multiple continents now instead of one continent, as we're told the earth used to be. I don't know. I can't speak from experience about that. But it was significant because people had been living at least 400 years before and after people were living into their 200s. And we find that Abraham lived to be only 175. And now we find his son Isaac has passed away at the age of 180. So we're going back to this passage here. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac breathed his last, and he died and was gathered to his people old and full of days. This is what passed for a full life these days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So funerals are a great time to get together with family, even if you have had tension with them. A good time to see one another as you're coming together to bury your loved ones. Maybe it gives you some time to think about what really matters. So this also gives the Bible a chance to do a quick pivot. We're going to find out how Esau's been doing. We've been following Jacob. Let's have a quick look at how Esau's been doing. We're going to do some housekeeping here. We're going to go through a genealogy. And for everybody who gets into the Bible, I think, when we hit these genealogies, they're kind of dry. They kind of strike us as irrelevant. What do we care about the people who lived thousands of years ago? What does it matter to us? A lot of the times, the names that we see in these genealogies don't really show up again in history. But I can think of two reasons why it matters. For one thing, a lot of the times these genealogies are the reasons that we know some of our history. We're able to make connections between the people that are in the genealogy. We're going to see some of that in this genealogy, kind of get a sense of what Esau's been up to as Jacob has been away. Another reason that these genealogies are important is because this is the Bible. This is the word that God gave individuals such as Moses, who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, such as the writers of, say, Paul's letters. Paul, when he wrote those letters, such as the writers of the Gospels, the account of Jesus. God gave his word to these people to put down for posterity, and God cared enough about the people in the genealogies to make sure that their names were recorded for posterity too. And that didn't extend only to God's chosen people, only to the descendants of Israel. It also extended to the people outside of Israel. As we're going to see here with Esau, Esau is not part of the promise that God gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God was specifically picking out a line that promise was going to go through, and Esau was not a part of it. But God apparently still cares about Esau and still cares about all of his descendants, because we're going to find out a lot about them in this chapter as we breeze through as quickly as we can, because this chapter is going to be full of difficult to pronounce names, and I find the best way to get through these names is to go as fast as I can. And if you happen to be an expert in Semitic languages and hear me butchering the names, please let me know in the comments. I love to learn. So these are the generations of Esau, that is Edom. And we found earlier in the book that Esau had a couple nicknames. One of them referred to, he was a hairy baby when he came out of the womb. So one of them meant hairy, and the other one meant red, because he had a ruddy appearance. So I believe Edom, it's very much like Adam, and Adam also had, that name also comes from red, probably from the red dust that God made Adam from. So Esau would have been his true name, hairy, and then Edom would have been the nickname, red. These are the generations of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the Canaanites, and we know that that caused his parents some consternation. Ada, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, one of the Canaanite nations there that God eventually had the nation of Israel run out of the country. Oholibamah, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite. And Basemath, Ishmael's daughter, the sister of Nebaioth. We know that Ishmael was a descendant of Abraham through Abraham's, I don't know that the Bible ever calls her a concubine. I looked it up. I couldn't find a reference to Hagar as a concubine, but she was a servant, a handmaid of Sarah. And when Sarah couldn't have a child, Sarah told Abraham to have one through Hagar. But Ishmael was not the son of the promise that God made to Abraham. God made it clear that Isaac was to be the son of that promise. So, when Esau realized that his parents didn't care for his Canaanite wives, he decided to marry Basemath to appease them. We saw that earlier in the book also. And Ada bore to Esau Eliphaz. Basemath bore Reuel, and Oholibamah bore Jeush, Jalem, and Korah. These are the sons of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. Then Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the members of his household, his livestock, and all his beasts, and all his property that he had acquired in the land of Canaan. He went into a land away from his brother Jacob, for their possessions were too great for them to dwell together. The land of their sojournings could not support them because of their livestock. So here's the extra explanation that I said we'd have. Earlier, when Jacob sounds like he's going to follow Esau, he doesn't. He winds up going to settle in Shechem for a while. And it seems that it's because he doesn't trust Esau. But also, this would be a good reason, too. If they have flocks that are too large and they can't find feed for all of their flocks. So Esau settled in the hill country of Saiyar. Esau is Edom. These are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites in the hill country of Saiyar. That's why it's important that we know that he's Edom, because a people named the Edomites came from him, and they were significant in the history of the future nation of Israel, tended not to get along with the future nation of Israel. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Ada, the wife of Esau; Reuel, the son of Basemath, the wife of Esau. The sons of Eliphaz were Teman. That is an important name later on in the Bible, especially in the prophecy about the Edomites. God often refers to them by the name Teman. Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. Timnah was a concubine of Eliphaz, and there was a city, I think, I'm not sure. I think it was an Edomite city. I might be mixing it up with a Philistine city, so I'll not go any further than that. So just to have that association there. Timnah was a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son. She bore Amalek to Eliphaz, and he became the father of a significant group of people, the Amalekites, who were definitely not friends with Israel. God eventually told King Saul to attack them, and when he conquered the people he was attacking, to not let any escape. Saul did not obey God. He put off killing them, and that was a reason that Saul did not remain king. The kingdom was later given to David, who is probably the best king of Israel, and also significant in the lineage of Jesus. So Amalek winds up being an important figure in the events of Israel. I don't think when God told Saul to attack the Amalekites and not to leave any existing, that it was intended to wipe out the entire group of the Amalekites, because we find that Amalekites did survive that, but we do not find Saul put off killing the Amalekites, but we do not hear that the Amalekites escaped the battle. We do not hear that anyone survived that battle. So I've seen a movie trying to explain about how how a figure in the Bible later may be related to Amalek, because Saul let the king survive. I do not think that is accurate. I think God was telling Saul, make an attack. I want to punish the Amalekites for how they've harmed Israel. Make the attack. But it would have been an attack on a limited group. I think there were people beyond the scope of Saul's attack. But unfortunately, Saul was disobedient, and that did not work well for Saul's future and his family. So anyway, that was a rabbit trail. I'll get back on track. But definitely a significant person here. Timnah was a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son. She bore Amalek to Eliphaz. These are the sons of Adah, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Reuel, Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These are the sons of Basemath, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Aholibamah, the daughter of Adah, the daughter of Zibeon, Esau's wife. She bore to Esau Jeush, Jalem, and Korah. These are the chiefs of the sons of Esau, the sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn of Esau, the chiefs Taman, Omar, Zepho, Kenaz, Korah, Gatam, and Amalek. These are the chiefs of Eliphaz in the land of Edom. These are the sons of Adah. And we're very, a lot of repetition here. I guess the Bible wants to make sure that we get this right. God definitely cares about these people. And for good reason, as we're going to see. These are the sons of Reuel, Esau's son, the chiefs Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These are the chiefs of Reuel in the land of Edom. These are the sons of Basemath, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Aholibamah, Esau's wife, the chiefs Jeush, Jalem, and Korah. These are the chiefs born of Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Esau, that is Edom, and these are their chiefs. So one thing we're finding out about Esau, his sons, they grew to be important people, chiefs. In the King James, it uses the word dukes. The King James was written in 1611, so that would have been the way that the people of the time would have regarded someone as being of importance. They would have related them to a duke. These are the sons of Saiyar, the Horite, the inhabitants of the land Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, we've seen that name before, Anna, we've seen that name before, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. These are the chiefs of the Horites, the sons of Saiyar, in the land of Edom. And I stumbled on something I wanted to go show you. We had, during the time of Abraham, some kings attacked the region that Abraham lived in and captured Abraham's nephew. Abraham went on a rescue attack back against these kings, and God allowed him to be victorious against 4 kings with a band of little more than 300 men. About 318 men helped Abraham, and in addition to Abraham's 3 friends and anyone that they brought with them. But these kings came and defeated the Rephaim. That was a group of giants, literal giants that lived in the land. And that was what I was getting at before. Kiriath Arba was a descendant of the Anakim. The Anakim were also giants, would have been related to the Rephaim. So they defeated the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, the Amim in Shavath Kiriathaim, and the Horites in the hill country of Saiyar, as far as El Paran on the border of the wilderness. So we've already met these Horites without realizing it. They ran afoul of these kings also. Of course, the Horite people did survive that encounter and continue to live in the land, continue to do well. They've got descendants. These are the chiefs of the Horites, the sons of Saiyar, in the land of Edom. The sons of Lotan were Hori and Hamim, and Lotan's sister was Timnah, probably the same Timnah who was the concubine of, what was his name, Eliphaz, mother of, there he is, Eliphaz, mother of Amalek. So that was probably her. That's probably why a sister is being mentioned specifically here. These are the sons of Shobal, Alvan, Manahath, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. These are the sons of Zibeon, which is a name we've heard of before, Aya, and Anna. He is the Anna who found the hot springs in the wilderness as he pastured the donkeys of Zibeon his father. So Anna apparently made a significant discovery. He was the son of this person, Zibeon. These are the children of Anna, Dishon, and Oholibamah, the daughter of Anna. And we know that Oholibamah married Esau. So we're seeing how these families are starting to tie together. These are the sons of Dishon, Hemdan, Eshban, Ithran, and Cherah. These are the sons of Ezer, Bilhan, Zavan, and Achan. These are the sons of Dishan, Uz, and Aran. And I'm curious about this Uz because the book of Job in the Bible is considered to be the oldest book in the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. It comes right before the book of Psalms. If you open the Bible right in the middle, you're going to hit Psalms, so just go one book earlier, you'll hit the book of Job. I was considering covering it in some of these videos. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get around to it anytime soon. But it tells us that Job, in the book of Job, God calls attention to Job because Job is the most righteous man in the Bible, and I think it says that he was the wealthiest, if at least one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, before the time of Solomon. Solomon definitely would have been recognized as the wealthiest man in his time, and but before Solomon, Job was recognized for his wealth and also for his righteousness before God, and Job came from the region of Uz. So it makes me wonder whether Job would have been of these Canaanites, the sons of Dishan, Uz, and Aran. These are the chiefs of the Horites, the chiefs Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anna, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. These are the chiefs of the Horites, chief by chief, in the land of Saiyar. And by the way, the Edomites eventually took over the region of Saiyar, as I understand it, because the Bible refers to the Edomites later on by their relation to Mount Saiyar, which would have been prominent in that region. These are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the Israelites. Bela, the son of Beor, reigned in Edom, the name of his city being Dinhabah. Bela died, and Jobab, the son of Zerah of Basra, reigned in his place. Basra still exists. I did pull up a Wikipedia article about Basra, so we have a map here. When I pull open the map, it takes away the little red pin that shows where Basra is. Nowadays, it's called Busira. So it would have been in about this region. That's probably where you'll find Basra if you go and look for it today. Busira. And we're going to close that. And that was the reference to the Horites. There we go. We're back. Jobab died, and Husham of the land of the Temanites reigned in his place. So probably the descendant of Esau there, Teman. Husham died, and Hadad, the son of Bedad, who defeated Midian in the country of Moab, reigned in his place, the name of his city being Avith. Hadad died, and Samlah of Masrekah reigned in his place. Samlah died, and Shaul of Rehoboth on the Euphrates reigned in his place. So originally the translation would have been of Rehoboth on the river reigned in his place, but they would have understood the river to be the Euphrates because it would have been significant at that time. Shaul died, and Baal-Hanan, the son of Akbor, reigned in his place. Baal-Hanan, the son of Akbor, died, and Hadar reigned in his place, the name of his city being Pau. His wife's name was Mehetabel, the daughter of Matred, daughter of Mezahab. Makes me wonder what she did to earn the significance of being mentioned in the genealogy. You don't usually see a lot of women unless there's some significance to them. These are the names of the chiefs of Esau, according to their clans and their dwelling places by their names. The chiefs Timnah. Oh, I was right. There was a chief Timnah. Alva, Jetheth, Oholibamah, Elah, Pinan, Kenaz, Teman, Mibzar, Magdiel, and Iram. These are the chiefs of Edom, that is Esau, the father of Edom, according to their dwelling places in the land of their possession. So we got through all of that. Got through probably comes across a little dry, but we did find out some important things about Esau, and some things, such as that he is the father of the Temanites, the Edomites, in the region of Saiyar. These are going to be important later on in the Bible, especially if you look at the book of Obadiah, which is really short. You're going to see that I think Obadiah is only a chapter long. It has some prophecies about the Edomites. So that is where we're going to stop next week. I believe I'll be able to do the stream next week. I believe there won't be any interruptions. So Lord willing, next week, we'll be getting into some of the more meaty parts of Genesis. From Genesis 1 through about Genesis 11, I kind of considered the beginning of the book. It tells us about God's creation. It tells us about the worldwide flood. It tells us about the Tower of Babel, where the languages were fractured. So now we speak different languages across the world, and gives us the setup for how the nations were organized, where the nations came from, that genealogy. That's 1 through 11 in Genesis. And then from 12 through 25 is the story of Abraham. So the first member of this family that we've been following, that God has given this specific promise from, the land of Canaan, is going to go to Abraham's offspring. And Abraham wanders as a nomad through this region. Eventually he has his son Isaac. So from Genesis 25 through from Genesis 12 through 25 is Abraham's story. And then in Genesis 26, that I think starts Isaac's story proper. We do hear a little bit about Isaac a little bit earlier, but I would kind of lump Isaac and Jacob together, because Isaac doesn't really have many accounts of his life. We do know that God extended the promise to Isaac and to Isaac's offspring. And then Isaac was the father of Jacob and Esau, and God extended the promise to Jacob. So Isaac's and Jacob's story is really, I think, one section of Genesis. So the first 11 chapters, and then from 12 through 25, and then from 26, we're coming up to what I would consider the end of Jacob's story. We still see a little bit of Jacob, but now the account is going to start being Jacob's son, Joseph. We're getting into Joseph's story proper, and that is going to start at Genesis 37 and move on to Genesis 50, the end of the book. So we're in the last leg of the study in Genesis. So this section, it's kind of hard to tie in the relevance, especially with the genealogy at the end. Genealogies are definitely useful for archaeologists, for students of history. So since I'm familiar with how Edom and the Amalekites interacted with Israel later on, and not that I'm a student of history, but I've studied the Bible enough to have some familiarity with that. I can recognize the significance of some of the names here, but I recognize as we're getting into the Bible, as we're looking at what it says, it's kind of hard to follow. What does this all mean to us? Why did God put this here for us? What does that matter? Sure, it's sad that Deborah, Rebecca's nurse, died, and Isaac died, and Rachel died, and then we get into this dry section. It's kind of a downer section in the Bible, honestly. I think it helps to remember that God does care about these people. God cares about Jacob and the struggles that he has. Jacob, at the end of his life, says that it was a life full of suffering. And then God cares about the people of Esau. And what we can take away from that is when we're having struggles, when we're going through hard times, God cares about our struggles personally also. God encourages us to seek him for comfort when we're struggling. That was part of the reason that Jesus came to earth, because when Adam and Eve sinned and brought death to the world, God definitely could have chosen to say, nope, sorry, you've made your bed, you lie in it. I I don't care about your situation anymore. You rebelled against me. We're done. But he didn't do that. He cared about the fact that humankind had introduced death into the world. He cared that that now we were suffering, and we see throughout these stories that God keeps reaching into the lives of humanity to give comfort, to give hope to people on this path of history, on toward his plan to actually redeem us from that death, from our sin, through his son Jesus, who came to earth, who lived a human life like us, who suffered like we did, and even more so because he died the death of a criminal, even though he was innocent. He bore all of the sins of humanity upon himself, something no other human can do. And because of his death and his resurrection, which proves that he is God the Son, was qualified to take the punishment for our sins, now we have hope that we're going to be in heaven with God for eternity. I'll go ahead and tell this story. I wasn't planning on it, but I think it's relevant here. The event that happened in our family that I was expecting to upend us was the passing of my grandmother. She has been living in our house for a couple years because she had dementia, and we were taking care of her in her last years. We were watching her decline, remembering less and less, becoming more confused, wondering where she was, wondering what city this is, why am I here, who am I? Toward the end of her life, she was confusing the house with a train. And no matter how much we explained, there's the kitchen, there's the TV room, she could not grasp that she was in a house. She thought it was a train. Other times she thought it was a hospital, which makes a little more sense because we were giving her care for her health. So, and she, thankfully, it seems like she remembered her son, my father, throughout the process, but didn't remember other members of the family, which you understand would happen in that time of life. And I'm able to smile having seen how she dealt with the dementia. It wasn't a pretty process. Eventually her brain lost the ability to communicate with her legs, and she was bedridden, and that was not a pleasant process for her at the end of her life. I'll spare you those details. But when she passed away, when my mother came in, I live in a multi-generational house, if you haven't picked up on it, but when my mother came in and told me that Grandma had died, and I went to the room and saw where her body was lying, she wasn't there anymore in spirit, there was not a tear shed. And it's not because we didn't love her. It's not that it's not that we were heartless. It's because we were joyful, because we knew that she had a relationship with God through Jesus. And so that means that even after all of her suffering, the dementia, the paralysis, all of her hardship, now that she's deceased, now that her spirit is no longer with her physical body here on this earth, we know that that spirit now resides in heaven, and we are promised a glorified body, a new body, a better body, one that doesn't get beset by dementia and decay and mutations and death. And the Bible promises us a rich eternity at peace with God in heaven. And so I am sure that she is celebrating her new life up there, and we look forward to joining her there also. And I shouldn't say that there wasn't a tear. Her son did feel the emotion of his mom being gone, but he also felt the emotion of his mom being free from her suffering. So even though he cried, it wasn't tears of hopelessness. He tells a story about his father, my grandfather, her wife. She was his wife. He was her husband. But my grandfather died when he was 44 years old of a heart attack. My dad was 18. And at that time, of course, it was a shock to the family. My dad did not have a relationship with God. his dad had told him that my grandfather told my dad that my grandfather believed in God, but that was all he said basically about God. My dad was raised in a Catholic church, but at the time that my grandfather passed away, that hope just wasn't there. For my dad at that time, it was heart-wrenching, and my dad compares his mourning of his father compared to his mourning of his mother in a very different light. And it's because by now, my dad has developed a personal relationship with God through Jesus. Dad is hanging on the righteousness of Jesus to make him right with God, not on anything that my dad does, because the Bible tells us that's a futile endeavor. There's nothing a human being other than the Son of God can do to make us right with God. So now that my dad understands that, that's his view on life, and now that he knows his mother understood that, then he has hope of her being in heaven. And we're kind of waiting to see what happened to his dad. We've heard that maybe he did have a personal relationship with God, but it wasn't one that he conveyed to his son. So we're kind of in limbo, if you'll forgive the pun, on that concept. So I'm sharing that because I wanted to pass on that because of Jesus paying for our sins, paying the punishment for our sins, because God cared about us enough that God the Son paid that punishment for us. As the Bible tells it, that was something Jesus wanted to do for us. It wasn't something that he was made to do by God the Father. They are unified. The Divine Trinity is unified, so it was an agreement made in heaven that this was the plan. Because they cared for us in that sense, then Jesus' death gives us hope, gives us human beings hope. And very often we Christians find that when we're facing death or the death of a loved one, we do not mourn the same way that the world does. Of course, we feel the pain of the loved one no longer being here. We may miss that loved one personally, but we also recognize if that loved one had a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, also had peace with God through Jesus Christ, was saved from their sins, then that loved one will be reunited with us in heaven. We'll be reunited with them. We'll see them again, and that will be a joyful occasion for eternity. So praise the Lord that he cares about us, and we can see a glimpse of that care in the fact that he recorded for us the suffering of Jacob, the losses that Jacob faced, this nurse Deborah, his wife Rachel, and his father Isaac, and that God cared even for Esau, that God made sure that genealogy was delineated precisely so that we know who Esau was and just how important his children came to be. So with that, I'll wrap it up for tonight and look forward to going on to Jacob's son Joseph next week. God bless you.